the clock on all of my devices, so I'm going to go ahead and call us to order. Welcome to the Monday, March 23rd, 2026 regular meeting of the Columbus School District. Adam, would you call our roll call, please?
Majewski.
Present.
O'Brien.
Here.
Wilson Rappy.
Here.
Pearson.
Here.
Pulver. Here. Rule.
Here.
Smith.
Here. All present and accounted for. We have a quorum. Andrea, we were properly noticed, to my knowledge. Reminder, the mission of the Columbus School District ensures each student is prepared for future success. I would take a motion to adopt our agenda. I have no adjustments to it that I'm aware of.
So moved. Second.
I have a first from John Pearson and a second from Mike O'Brien. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? Motion carries. It takes us into our board business this evening. First item up is a business services update.
Yeah, we continue the process. We have a couple of finalists kind of doing reference checks. We're not positive, just based on their current positions, when the start date will be. As far as CISA 5, they're still working through the system, still kind of reverse engineering some things, just to make sure they have a full understanding. You'll see board bills coming probably at the first meeting. Just keep in mind April is an actual board meeting. We kind of changed that structure. So you should see 2 months we're anticipating of board bills at that meeting, and then another board bill coming. So whenever we're ready, we'll bring to you the recommendation for hire.
Questions on the business services update? I assume that we're working to maintain all of our GPI deadlines on anything that would be business office related.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And probably the biggest challenge is going to be the preliminary budget, just where it started, but that's our job to do. We'll figure it out.
Okay. Next item up under board business, remaining capital referendum funds.
Yeah, so I'm going to start it off and kind of take you on a little bit of a journey here. I wrote it all down just to make sure, A, I stay focused. I have a tendency to wander, but B, then hit everything that's relevant. So rewinding back to 2020, in April 2020, we passed a referendum here in the district, a capital referendum. Great support by the community. It was awesome. As part of that referendum, the voters approved not to exceed $30 million for aging infrastructure at the high school, elementary capacity, and then potential future land purchase. Now, one part of this that's important is the actual question. The actual language on the question that was voted on, and I'll read it directly to you. Be it resolved by the school boards of Columbus School District, Columbia, Dodge, and Dade Counties, Wisconsin, that there shall be issued pursuant to Chapter 67 of the Wisconsin statutes, general obligation bonds in the amount not to exceed $30 million for the public purpose of paying the cost of district-wide facility improvement program consisting of construction of addition and renovations at the elementary school and the high school, capital maintenance and infrastructure improvements at all district buildings, acquisition of land, and acquisition of furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. So that was the actual question. What was communicated to the public and what we stuck throughout the referendum process was kind of the cost summary, about $18 to $19 million going to the elementary school. The current middle school, which at that time was the intermediate/middle school, somewhere between $1 and $2 million, between $8 and $9 million to the high school, and then $1 million set aside for what was to be a future land purchase. Going back to the basics of referendum borrowing, the borrowing for the referendum took place in 2 different years. The timing that the borrowing occurred was very fortunate for the district. As you probably remember, around 2020, 2021, there were a lot of factors going on in the world. Initially, the original projections were projecting borrowing $15 million in both 2020 and 2021 with a higher interest rate, so a mill rate around $1.62. The final funding, when the rates actually came in, $21 million was borrowed in 2020, and then $9 million in 2021, with a much lower interest rate, just based on what was going on. So the mill rate actually came in at $1.16. And I know a lot of you were on the board or paid attention during that. Just from a reduction in cost and a reduction in mill rate, that was like a $6.7 million reduction in cost. And we're talking a 46 cents reduction in mill rate. Today, we're going to talk about the 2021 borrowing, or the bond that was issued in 2021. Through the duration of the project, $1 million have been set aside or allocated and still remains set aside for a potential land purchase. Over the course of the last 5 years or so, both myself and my predecessor did the majority of the work trying to search for land. I believe Annette thoroughly vetted a handful of sites at a minimum. I can see that in records. I know that she talked to, just from my conversations with her, even more than that were actually documented. I know during my tenure, we investigated at a very minimum of 16 different sites. Some at a very high level, some at a more direct level. Throughout the entire process, working with the landowners, our landowners have been excellent, very cordial, very upfront, very honest. So I've appreciated all of them that we've got to work with throughout it. We have noticed that there's some issues when it comes to finding and purchasing land in Columbus. Some of the obstacles and issues that we ran into, floodplains, floodways, wetlands, infrastructure costs being ran in order to get to certain locations, power lines, especially high voltage power lines, surrounding businesses and factors. Even there are some owners that aren't willing to part with certain parcels, and by all means, that's their prerogative. And then over time, there's been an increased cost per acre, just with the purchasing of land. We're at the point where we're about 60 days out from where 5 years would be from when that bond was issued. At this point, I can say with more confidence than not that a purchase of land is not viable. It's most likely not to happen with that $1 million. And that mid-May date is an important benchmark. So with us nearing the 5-year mark, I think May 17th, 2021, that $1 million remains unspent. And I think that we have to start to have some conversations. There's some time, but there's becoming some urgency to this. At about the 5-year mark, there becomes an increased IRS risk of any unspent referendum funds. Primarily, there is a risk of a penalty. Please note that this is not against the law. It's not a legal thing, but what it is it's an agency-issued penalty that could occur if you levy the funds for something and then you don't flat out go and do it within this arbitrary time frame, right? So we've been working with a couple of consultants and legal on what are our different options. So we've utilized our experts throughout that. One of them being PMA. PMA is just a company that works in public financing in the public sector, and they're the ones that have typically worked with our bonds and defeasance in the past. And then there's been a couple of different legal entities that we've worked with. A little bit less Boardman Clark. They are our typical counsel. Throughout the last year, it's pretty much been the counsel that's been issued through PMA, Quarles and Brady. Thank you. So really, they've identified a handful of different options for us to weigh with what to do with that approximate 1 million. It might be just a little bit more or a little bit less, but I'm fairly certain it's a little bit more. Option number 1, we can purchase land. All right, that would be ideal. You know, that's what was communicated. As I started, that's probably not a very viable option. A second option is simply let the money sit and continue to look for land. This is highly discouraged by legal and our financial consultants. I don't see that as a reasonable option, but it's an option nonetheless. The third option is determine that the project is complete and then use those remaining funds to pay down debt. So just say, our work is done with this referendum question. We're going to pay down debt with the rest of the $1 million. Another option is we could implement a strategy in which the district executes projects within the scope of the referendum project. So that's why I read the initial referendum question. in the question, it doesn't specifically say $1 million must go to it. But with that also being said, I know in all of the literature that I reviewed and that was passed out to the community, it was fairly clear that $1 million was set aside with the idea that it was going to be a new site for a school building. And then the fifth option is being a combination of option number 3 and option 4. Some of the money could be used to pay down debt, and the other money to do work within the scope of the referendum question. Now, depending on the amount that we would allocate to one or the other, it just kind of impacts our timeline of when we could pay back those funds. If we would implement the option where we would spend some of the remaining funds, we could utilize Fund 46, which is an established capital improvement fund, and transfer some of the funds over there. The less amounts, if we would use a combined strategy, the less amount of money that we would pay down, or use towards questions, the longer, or the more that we would use to the question, the longer it would take to put that money back into Fund 46. So for example, if 3/4 of that $1 million went towards projects at the buildings, it would take multiple years to replenish that fund in Fund 46. So in summary, we're nearing the 5-year mark, and that's coming up in May. Those are the recommended 5 different options that we have for that approximate $1 million remaining dollars. We have some time, but my recommendation would be hopefully by the April meeting, or very worst case scenario by the first May workshop that we take some action on.
So that's kind of the outline preface, you know, I think we've had some conversation about different parts of this when we have talked about some different land options over the last several months. So our goal tonight is to begin and open this conversation with what do we believe as a board is the most appropriate use of those funds that remain. And as Jake had kind of alluded to, time-wise, we wanted to bring this out over several meetings so that we had the ability to have some robust conversation. Additionally, we have things tentatively set that potentially PMA could come to our next meeting, the first meeting in April, so that if we have some specific questions, if we want to see some specific financial structures for what would it look like if we, you know, did some sort of combination of debt pay down and capital improvement within that scope, what that would look like. So I just wanted you to know that that's kind of been built into that timeline. I think ultimately our goal would be to have a decision made by the end of April at our second meeting, but we do have like into the first part of May if we would need to with our first meeting, recognizing that whatever strategy we execute, they're going to need time to carry that out prior to that potential deadline of May 17th if we choose as a board that we're going to respect that as a hard deadline to act on. So I kind of open the floor up from there for thoughts, questions, where to start the conversation.
Is it okay if I start?
Of course.
First of all, I'd very much like to see the land, and that I know 2 people have worked very hard for a bunch of years to try to find that. But then secondly, I believe that when that other 29 million, we had to set some parameters on what we could do with that. And some things didn't get in the program.
In the original project.
I definitely would like to have us take a look at what are some of those big ones first, and those are things that would affect the Columbus School District the most in terms of importance or having, etc., and use that as a base. And then secondly, if, I have no idea in money and how much that would be, but if there's some left over, certainly paying debt, would be a consideration. And I just, all along though, I think it's real important, the community knows we have not found land, and when we do decide, they know exactly what we're gonna do with it.
Are those projects that were shelved that Mike described, are those still within this, considered within the scope of the referendum?
My gut says yes. I can't say for sure because I don't know all the projects that were shelved. Basically, any project that happens in any of these three buildings that are capital related most likely fits into the scope of the question.
Yeah.
It's a very broad question, so.
I generally agree with Mike then, that if it is within the scope of the referendum, then there are still needs to be done in the school. And I think that if we have this money available, then we should do that. We should lean towards that with, like you said, a little bit. If there's leftover, then absolutely we can pay down debt because we have done some defeasance in the past. So I would lean towards working on projects.
As a point of clarification, if we decided to use it to pay down debt, there'd be really no tax relief until the end of the payment. So like you said, 30 something, 38. So no matter what we do, taxpayers are not going to see much difference until 2038. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
From how I understand it,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
So I
I
tend to,
suspect there would be substantial interest savings,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that potential relief would be,
at the end,
at the end, would be a larger relief, if you will,
Yeah.
for lack of better words. But yes, there's a payment schedule on that, and I think similar to our previous defeasance, if we opted to roll that money back into the debt, I believe it would be defeased until it could be paid, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
It's not like we can put it on the principal now like you could on your
Correct.
home
and the
mortgage.
gist of it,
Correct.
the communication then should be that even if we didn't do anything with it, it's not going to have much property tax relief right now. Is that correct?
That would be my understanding also. I
Okay.
think that's a great question of clarification. If we do choose to have PMA come to the next meeting, I think that's a great point to clarify that indeed that if we decided to 100% put it back on debt payment, that I believe it would be a defeasance for now, and then it would be a future payment that would reduce interest, but would not change
That was
the
my
current
understanding,
taxpayer
and I was
levy.
just asking for clarification. Yeah.
Right. I believe that you're correct, John, so I think that's a great point to have them clarify for us again.
It looks 2040 final payments
2040.
on most options.
So,
Okay.
But it does reduce the last 2 years, I
Yeah.
think, if I remember the chart correctly.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I tend to agree with Mike's statements, and I don't really feel like I have a ton to add to that. As far as looking at, some of the options just aren't viable, which whittles our list down a bit. I do think the communication is going to be really a critical thing too, to share with the community as much information as we can, which I think we do a good job of, but it's just a lot, and until with time going by, I think that as much clarification as we can give will be helpful.
I would agree. I know there are still projects that need to be done, so that would be probably in the community's best interest to get those things done now as opposed to waiting until they need to be done, right? But yeah, I agree, communication with the community about the lengths that we've gone to identify land, and listing the reasons, just like you did, on why they aren't viable for us. I think that will help alleviate a lot of questions that might come up and make people feel a little bit more comfortable with the decision. But that the fact that the money is still going back to the same project, I think would be sufficient.
As far as the time frame, I honestly think we've done really well trying hard for 5 years. I know it feels like we're down to the wire now that we've got to make a decision, but we have had information. We've been brought along the process this whole time. So I think it's kind of good that we've waited to see what we can find, and now we're addressing it because we really haven't found anything. So I think it's no problem to make a decision by April, or like we're saying, the very first part of May. I guess my feeling is that to use it on infrastructure, we have done significant defeasance and debt pay down. And if we do additional infrastructure projects, that benefits the students that are in our community right now and are coming up in the next few years, which I guess presumably the land purchase kind of would have done as well. I do feel since 2020 we've had declining enrollment, like almost every district in Wisconsin. So it's just that's something that's always out there when we're thinking about big decisions. Enrollment's going down, so we have to make the best use of our money to benefit those kids. So I would lean towards doing the projects. I'm sure I could be persuaded to throw a little bit of debt pay down in there if you guys felt strongly about that, but I think we've all had really good background information with which to make this decision and discussion.
I'm going to throw out a devil's advocate thought, and so here's one of the things that I think is something that we're going to have to work to help people understand. We just voted for a operational referenda, right? We just asked our community for $1.75 million a year for the next 4 years. And I think that it will be important for people to understand that this money is not equivalent use, in the sense that we can't just take this money, put it into the general fund, and not levy 1 million of 1.75 million next year, right? I mean, I think that it's confusing, and it is, I mean, we know firsthand school finance is really confusing when we start talking about referenda and these referenda question and the statutes that surround this. A lot of people would look at this, how they do their household spending, right? And they'd say, okay, you've got $1 million that you set aside. Well, then you just pay down your mortgage principal by $1 million, or you don't levy that other, 1 million out of the 1.7 that's scheduled for next year. You can give us a break on that. And it doesn't work that way. We legally can't do that. And so I think that is something that we're going to have to spend some time figuring out how to help the public understand, that there are some limitations on how we can utilize these funds, that we can use them for capital projects that fall within the scope of the original referenda question. But simply alleviating like our current referenda for operational referenda is not an option. I don't know if others have thoughts about that or
I think when we did the operational referendum, there was a lot of good communication surrounding that too, so that should help. I think people, they had the question of, well, we just had a referendum, but they start to understand the difference between the infrastructure and the operations.
Yeah, I kind of think that piggybacks onto mine, that people have to understand how that works, and even paying it down on this end, you're not going to see results until the back end.
right. And I think, as far as I recall, there is no strategy available to put that back to the taxpayer immediately, from my understanding and the work that the legal department has provided, right?
No, none of the options.
I mean, there is no way to cut a check to every
Just say, yeah.
voting member to say, here's $26 back because of the $1 million we're not utilizing.
Correct.
So, what are our questions then, if we're thinking about, I mean, do we want to bring PMA to our next meeting to talk further about some of these kind of strategies. Like Jake said, this idea of some sort of combination of pay down debt and capital improvement versus completing more projects, and what that looks like financially, and how that is replenished in Fund 46 and that exchange. I think that's an area that we need some clarification, or really need to understand.
I think it'd be helpful, just for clarification, to have somebody who's expert on it, who really could answer some of those hard questions.
It's like Jake said, if we're gonna use Fund 46 to facilitate, and we're ultimately going to do $1 million worth of projects, it's going to take several years to replenish that back through Fund 46, and I think we have to understand what that looks like, and does that impact, I mean, are there further consequences of that, right? Are there unintended consequences of utilizing those Fund 46 funds at a different rate than we had scheduled or intended? Jake, do you have access to some of the original project,
I can find it.
as far as like what pieces of the project were, I mean, I know we did a lot of contingency work over several months and even a couple of years after original referenda, right? I know that Annette said, okay, here's where we're at, our contingency fund has this, we're gonna pull these projects in and complete these projects. I don't know if there is still a list. Obviously, we have our capital improvement plan, and those are all things that would likely be viable projects. But I don't know if there's any specifics off of the original project that I can recall that we weren't able to do on
Or
contingency.
cuts that had to be made.
Yeah,
I'll look for documentation and connect with administrators if I need to. I think the other thing to keep in mind, after the referendum finished, we did do Bray conducted the building facility study as well, which helped inform, and just to make sure that was after. And then that did help build the capital improvement plan. But I think it would be a good practice to cross-reference what was cut, if I can find an extensive list or any list. I think that's something we could do, and if I can't find it, we'll call, and if my best answer is there's no record of it, I'll let you guys know.
sure. Well, and even from that standpoint, our capital improvement plan, gives us a very clear pathway of what projects might need to be considered, and it will help us to continue to maintain the work that was done on the referendum, right? I mean, that was the whole point of when we established the Fund 46 for capital improvement, was we're gonna put all this money into our buildings. Let's make sure we're also putting aside the money to continue to maintain them in the future, so. All right, so PMA, we want some clarification on what those combinations might look like, and what that means for Fund 46. We're looking for potentially some list of initial parts of the project that were cut. If those aren't identifiable, then obviously our capital referenda or capital improvement plan. Am I missing anything else that we want to make sure that PMA is assisting us to address in information for clarification? Okay. Anything further on this? Questions, comments, otherwise? Okay. Jake, thanks for kind of compiling that and concisely reflecting that back to us. We've had parts of this conversation on and off over the last several months, so.
I was pretty good until the fractions came up.
The fractions.
Hi.
All right, into the superintendent's report tonight.
Student device leases, we updated you in your weekly update on this information. So Mike's been working pretty hard. Mike keeps a pretty thorough replacement plan and update plan within his department. Student devices is kind of this recurring maintenance that we have to have occurring. If you've been following the world, getting pricing is difficult, and price fluctuation is even more of a challenge. So recently Mike identified with some of his vendors that A, getting some bids just didn't happen. B, making sure that devices were available were going to be tough. But then C, making the purchase after July 1, which is the fiscal year, would result in a much higher cost. So in a cost-saving effort, we start to explore our different options. If we buy the devices that we're going to have to buy for students, it would be somewhere around $65,000. With where we are in the business office at this point, I'm not comfortable making that $65,000 purchase and then coming back to the board at the end going, oh crap, we dug into fund balance because we weren't positive, we were transitioning from Beth to CISA 6. That would be the most ideal way to do it, but we didn't budget for it in this year, and that doesn't make sense. Mike started to explore some other options, one of the creative options being a short lease, where we technically purchase it during this fiscal year. We take a lease from now until less than a year because audit problems come in after 1 year. Karen's shaking her head, she knows that. It becomes a costly process after that 1 year mark. So this was kind of a creative solution in which we could save some money with that. Mike, can you kind of jump into the figures a little bit for us?
So if we waited till July 1, the estimates for pricing, they can't give me exact pricing because usually you can't get a net anything that will allow you to pay any more than 30 to 60 days later. So the estimates are over $100 a device higher. So we're looking at about $15,000 more if we buy the same thing that we're looking at getting now versus July 1. If anything is available is the other question. And then if we went with this lease, the lease would cost a little over, it's between $2,000 and $3,000 is what we're looking at over the cost of what they would be if we bought them outright right now with no lease. So the fees on the lease would be about a $3,000 cost that we would incur, but we would still save about $12,000 then instead of waiting till July. Those devices would also be here on time or early, and we'd be able to set them up for students during the summer and have them ready on day one, which is also a big benefit of the lease on top of the savings. So those are the rough estimates there, but yeah.
So just for clarification, total cost of the lease?
Total cost of the lease? What is
It
it,
would
Mike?
Approximately.
be, if paid on July 1, $68,432.
So the 65 plus 3,000.
And would that allow us to pay that then into the next fiscal year? Or would we still be paying that lease on this fiscal year?
Not this fiscal, next fiscal year.
Correct, just, it would be paid on July 1.
July 1 of next fiscal
The
year.
agreement
Yeah.
would start this
Yeah, 'cause
fiscal year.
June 30th is the end of this fiscal year, so it would allow us to juggle that cost into the next fiscal year with about a $3,000 fee versus that $15,000 increase if we waited to that time frame, which isn't guaranteed. Okay.
And
I
we
feel like
can,
it could get worse in that
and we
time.
can actually get these devices if we lock in now, right?
Could.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is a concern that Mike has been working through that. They have X number of thousand available or is it 100 or
There's
1,000?
4,000.
Yeah,
left.
4,000 available, but just a week ago it was
It was
5,000.
5, yeah.
Oh,
And how many devices are we talking about?
We just need 150,
150.
so.
And that keeps us on schedule with our replacement schedule on our devices
Correct.
for technology.
What's the downside if we don't do those 150, we stay with the 150 that we currently have and don't do a new lease on them yet?
Sure. So we've got them on a 6-year plan. Every device we keep for 6 years and then phase them into a spare year at 7 years, and then the battery life is pretty much shot there. We can always repair and repair and repair. I think up to 10 years is what you could potentially use a Chromebook for licensing, and then it's no longer, it's a brick at that point. But we are a little bit above average on that 6 year. So that is the possibility, and then we would also be having more grade levels that have older and older devices. So we'd go to a situation where we were right around COVID when we had 1,200 300 devices that were all at the end of their life, and then we had to replace all of that. So this just keeps us slowly, chugging along.
You don't want students with downtime,
Waiting would mean
waiting for their
having to
computer to a
replace
different computer. Yeah.
just even more the following year.
Yes, and it'll be
Right.
300 devices next year that we need
300
to.
devices next year.
And next
No
year.
guarantee that anything's gonna be better.
Probably not getting cheaper.
And it's budgeted for, we budget for it annually, just
Right.
for that, for that amount.
We budget for the, plus CPI from this last year, right? We were not expecting these, one year it's a lease, the next year it's tariffs. We don't guess those. I do not guess those things. So
Next year it's black market, right?
if you have any heads up on what next year's going to be, let me know. So
We generally have not brought leases to the board. And we were just thinking, it does make sense to at least have the discussion and the heads up if we indeed do execute. I went back even into previous years, previous administration, and we didn't see any approvals for any leases.
Yeah.
So not necessarily looking for action, I guess looking for objections, if there are any.
I have
I mean, I think clearly you're
7-year-old.
trying to make the best fiscal decision that we can with the limited information that we have.
And we know the limitations of 7-year-old devices. They're just not, they're not useful, so it
And we
makes
do
sense.
very little short-term borrowing for anything, so
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's probably just gonna happen.
And we know the cost of tech is going up, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if the current chip shortage
Mhm.
alleviates, I don't think we're gonna see costs decrease.
chips, and then also this is more the increase is coming from the RAM prices. So like the chips are becoming shorter and shorter, but the RAM is going up because of data centers and
Yeah.
cloud needs. So it's kind of a two-prong approach.
Get started.
I'm
like, they're charging us, when you told me, I'm like, they're charging us for RAM? It's
Yes.
like, yeah, Jake,
Yes.
charge you for that.
Well, it seems to me that there's been a lot of work done in trying to save some money, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
AI is challenging us in a different direction.
Right. All right, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mike, for the background work on that. All right, that takes us into public conversation and public recognition and correspondence. I don't believe we have anyone signed up for public comment. All right. Next up on our list on public comment is our donation list for this evening. Just want to take a moment to thank our community partners and community supporters. We have a donation from Kiwanis Club to the Columbus Middle School Band Department in the amount of $5,000. Oh, thank you, sorry, $500, John, in case you were adding out lifetime.
I got 5.
A donation from Teresa Henning to Angel Funds for Free and Reduced Negative Balances in the amount of $250. Donation from Drexel Building Supply to be used for Columbus Middle School Attendance Challenge in the amount of $50. That sounds like fun. A donation from Columbus PTO to be used for Columbus Middle School Attendance Challenge in the amount of $50. A donation from Columbus Athletic Boosters to Track and Field in the amount of $3,080.96. A donation from Columbus Athletic Boosters to the Columbus High School track team in the amount of $373.20. A donation from Columbus Girls Basketball Backcourt Club Incorporated to the Columbus High School Girls Basketball in the amount of $3,346.40. Donation from Marlon Hensler to the Columbus High School Girls Basketball in the amount of $75. A donation from Matthew Gawker to the Columbus High School Boys Basketball in the amount of $350. A donation from Roberts Manufacturing of a Miller co-pilot welder to Columbus High School in the amount of value of $65,000. A donation from Miller of welding helmets, coats, gloves, and safety goggles to the Columbus High School in the amount of $800.
Seemed like we should have a drum roll or something almost
Seriously,
here.
that's-
So this month's donations were $73,000 $875.56. Which, folks, now it's only March, we've received contributions for $127,474.33, which speaks very highly of our community and their value of our kids and education in our school district. So I'm extremely proud of that.
And Julie, if I may, talking about number 11, the donation from Roberts, that $65,000 piece of equipment was a demo model, which is, you know, it's the same as a real model. That actual model is $125,000. It's, Eric and I have been down there. It is a crazy piece of equipment, and you know, if we want to get kids prepared for the real world and working, that's what they're using. That's what they're using at Roberts. That's what they're using at other locations. So it's a pretty fantastic piece and a great donation. So that number is misleading. That number's huge just looking at it, but really what the actual piece of equipment is worth is even more. And on top of that, Miller was kind enough to donate those parts, but Roberts had a huge part in urging that equipment be donated as far as gloves, goggles, and things like that.
That speaks volumes to the work that we've done on our community partnerships and our commitment to helping our students be career ready for whatever after high school looks like for them. So, yeah. All right. We'll take us into our board action agenda this evening. First up is consider approval for OE3. A reminder that looking for a ranking of that recommended in compliance by administration.
Motion to approve OE3 monitoring report as in compliance.
Second.
Sorry.
We have a first from Martha Rule, a second from Corey Olson-Raffy for OE3 in compliance. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up, consider approval for OE8. Again, recommendation from administration was in compliance.
I'll make a motion that we accept OE8 as in compliance.
Second.
Is that Karen Smith done? I have a first from John Pearson, a second from Karen Smith for OE8 in compliance. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Last item on board action is consider approval for OE9. Again, recommendation from administration was in compliance.
A motion to approve OE9 monitoring report as in compliance.
Second.
We have a first from Karen Smith, a second from Corey Olson-Raffy. Any discussion?
I noticed there is one small typo in the agenda. Recommended action item has it as OE8. I don't know how much.
No, on here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, up
I don't
there
know if
under
that is-
the text.
Yeah.
Got it. Probably just was a cut and paste.
Yeah.
So under the OE9 action item, just under the record, it looks like OE8 was cut and pasted. The correct OE9 is attached. So-
It is, yes,
Yes,
that's correct.
it is.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks.
It's right on my sheet.
Oh, Jake fixed it. Refresh your screen.
Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up this evening, we have the superintendent's consent agenda as listed there for you. It has our early college credit programs, Start College Now applications for approval. It has our purchasing cooperative agreement for nutrition services, our graduation requests, and our human resources report.
Motion to approve the superintendent's consent agenda.
Second.
I heard a first from Adam Pulver. I heard a second from Mike O'Brien. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next up is our board consent agenda. Includes all of our donations as discussed and reviewed this evening, as well as board meeting minutes from February 23rd and board workshop meeting minutes from March 9th.
Motion to approve the board consent agenda as presented.
Second?
I have a first from Karen Smith, a second from Martha Rule. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. For board calendar planning, just a couple of reminders listed there for you. Election coming up, I believe, my date's wrong, April 7th? April 7th is election, and then Board of Canvassers for the school board election will convene on April 9th, 2026 at 12:30 p.m. I believe that'll be in district office where it's typically held, so if anyone is interested in attending that, you're welcome. Our next board meeting will be on April 27th, 2026. Governance Committee is going to meet at 6 p.m., so 1 hour prior to our regular board meeting here in this location. And then at 6:45, we're going to have school board photos. Just don't anticipate any significant changes to our board makeup based on the current ballot, but always good to have us another year older, looking great. So we're going to snap a photo at 6:45 p.m. before our 7.
We do have another board meeting before this one, right? We do have one on the 6th, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this one.
Thank you.
Or
for
6th or whatever.
13th.
Not the
13th.
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 Second Monday.
13th, the second Monday. You're right, thank you for reminding me that. But I always try to get you, whenever we plan something a different time than our usual, I always
Yep.
try to make sure you guys have that ahead of time.
Yep.
So, thank you though, John, for, straightening my brain out.
Because you
on
did
that
say the next
calendar.
board meeting.
You're right, thanks for straightening my brain out on that. And anyone interested in a debrief this evening?
I would just like to put a shout out to the musical for all of those that participated and helped with that event. It was fantastic. They did a great job. I heard many comments from people in the district and outside of the district saying it was beyond their expectations for a high school performance, so that was wonderful to hear. And archery is at state this weekend, so we can wish them all luck there. And that's all I got.
And just follow up on that, on the musical, multiple involvement by a lot of different students in some, I know my wife was alive, she would really like the dancing and the movement. There was plenty of it in terms of that.
It's really good. They've really stepped it up. That is a difficult musical to perform, just with the musical demand, the singing demands, and even the performance demands in the band, and everybody just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, it was great
Awesome.
and well attended.
Good. Great to hear. All right. Nothing further. I would take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first from John Pearson, a second from Karen Smith, I believe I heard down there. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor with an eye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 7:48 p.m. Thank you all. Adam, I think we have a little bit of paper.
Yeah, I figured.
Mike, do you have anything that needs signed for that?
I think they're gonna send it probably tomorrow. No, just you. You'll get it tomorrow, I think, so.
And the kid?
Do let me
For life.
know.
Is Night Rider open up
You're
right
on tomorrow.
Oh, it's not.
It's 2 days?
Sorry,
No, I never tell my
I'm glad somebody. Yeah.